So we recently got a remastered version of Die Rise on the Black Ops 3 workshop by Xela and Dobby, and the work they have done with all the improvements that have been made to the map is absolutely incredible. In fact, I have no complaints at all regarding the remaster. It has gone above and beyond in reviving this classic Black Ops 2 map, and breathed new life into the experience through retextured weapons, updated visuals, and various side Easter eggs. But having played Die Rise for the first time in what has been a good number of years has reminded me of all the issues the map originally had. Die Rise was initially one of my least favourite zombies maps in general. I found myself playing arguably more bare bones maps like Verrückt more than I did Die Rise. But why? When playing the remaster, one of these reasons became immediately clear, and that's the lack of freedom. Ironically enough, at the start of the game, Die Rise grants some of the most early game freedom of any map. You can go down the giant elevator, or open the door in spawn and go any of 4 different ways from there, by taking advantage of the quick revive elevator and various drop downs. But that's exactly it. It's so easy to descend the map, the problem is getting back up. If I want to get back to spawn, I need to circumnavigate almost the entire map to get back there. Once I'm in the power area, I'm trapped between the power floor and the floor with the Sliquify buildable bench. If I ignore the elevator in spawn, as keys used to be one-time use items, I am then fully reliant on elevator RNG to get to a new area. And at that point, I'm just standing around waiting, which isn't exactly my idea of fun. This is especially true if it's the beginning of the game and I don't want to progress the rounds too far, especially if I don't have Jug and can't pack a punch. The same issue exists next to the trample steam workbench. If I want to get back to spawn, I am fully reliant on the 2 elevators to get back up. This was particularly tiresome in Black Ops 2, as I needed to go up and down 4 times to build the trample steam. This entire process just felt laborious, and slowed down the early game in a way that wasn't fun or interesting. It can certainly be argued that maps like Mob of the Dead or Origins have long setup times, but in those maps I'm actually doing something, like building staffs or feeding dogs, rather than training a zombie in front of an elevator for 20 minutes. In fact, the systems that maps like Mob, Origins or even Shadow use require you to progress the rounds to make more progress, whether it's to get an extra Afterlife or Beast mode, gathering souls to upgrade staffs, or even just getting enough points to open up these insanely expensive maps. There is a feeling of progress baked into these setup processes which Die Rise just lacks. Some of these corridors are so ridiculously tight, I don't want to risk starting a new round while all I have is an M14. Sure, I could buy the Remington off the wall, but then I have less points and have made it harder to generate them, and the only way to get another weapon is through the elevators. At the end of the day, Die Rise is so reliant on elevator RNG, it slows the entire map down to a crawl when setting up. And it makes it very challenging to get yourself back on your feet if you were to go down, as you may well have to spend 5 minutes in Dead Man's Corner waiting for an opportunity to get back Jug. In fairness to Treyarch, this wasn't quite as bad as Transit, where you were trapped in the middle of nowhere waiting for Ted to do his rounds on the bus, and you can see what Treyarch was trying to do with Die Rise. Fundamentally, Die Rise was about adding the challenge of verticality to the map, and ensuring resources weren't permanently available to the players. Zombies had been out for almost 4 years by the time Die Rise was released, and players were better than ever before. As a result, Treyarch were looking for new ways to spice up the formula and keep things interesting, while also adding a new layer of difficulty to be mastered. Taking away staple features like Juggernog would obviously upset fans, so it's just as well they never tried to do that. So instead, Treyarch were making these staple elements, particularly Juggernog and Quick Revive, harder to re-obtain, and ensuring it would take players longer to get them at all. This way, these perks became far more valuable due to how much effort it would take to re-obtain them, and also how long you'd have to go without them. Die Rise is far from the only example of this as well. In Transit, you had to get all the way to town to get Juggernog, and wait for Ted to take you back to spawn to re-obtain Quick Revive. In Moon, Juggernog only spawned on every other trip to Area 51, and the astronaut could take away these perks at any time. In Ascension, we saw a similar thing with the monkeys taking away perks. In a sense, Die Rise was just the latest innovation of this idea, and integrated the idea of verticality to give Die Rise a unique spin. Unfortunately, the result just ended up being more aggravating than interesting, and people would tend to wait for Jug to become available rather than continue to progress the round until it was. In a sense, the BO3 version of Die Rise takes away from this idea, by being able to control the elevators with an infinitely usable version of the key. As long as I can remember where Jug spawned, I can access it without having to wait for the elevators. On the other hand, I'm more incentivized to actually attempt to recover from a down, rather than just ending the game because I don't want to rely on the elevators. Who's Who was clearly Treyarch's answer to this though, as it rewarded those players who could pull off a revive by allowing them to keep all their perks besides Who's Who. Alternatively, if you had Quick Revive and Who's Who, and survived the bleed out timer in your Who's Who form, you only lost Who's Who and Quick Revive but kept everything else. It was certainly a lot more interactive than Tombstone, where you would go down and spend the rest of the round spectating your teammates, but it certainly wasn't without its flaws either. In high rounds, your only real option was to survive the bleed out timer, except now you don't have a stick with fire to get yourself out of trouble. In a sense, this itself was another 45 seconds of running around where no progress was being made, and only added to the feeling of spending more time waiting around than doing anything meaningful. Not to mention that it took away your guaranteed revive from Quick Revive, as if your Who's Who form died, the game would just end. This often disincentivized me from going for the free perk drop from the jumping jacks, as I didn't want to risk ending up with Who's Who. In the Black Ops 3 version however, you get to use Quick Revive even if you fail to survive in the Who's Who state. Not to mention getting the free perk expands your perk slots permanently, so now there isn't this huge downside of being stuck with Who's Who. Additionally, it's far less likely you'll get Who's Who from the perk drop, as the perk count has been up from 6 to 9. However, one of these new perks does arguably undermine the design of Die Rise. The reintroduction of PhD has a lot of implications on the map where verticality is the core design focus. The immunity to fall damage opens up a lot of possibilities that weren't available before. Not only does it open up various drops that would otherwise be impossible, but it also somewhat undermines the importance of the elevators. Now instead of waiting for the elevators to take me down to the power area, I can simply drop there. And rather than being unable to get back to spawn, I can simply jump off the map at any point and I'm transported back to the spawn area. Combine this with the new trample steam placements that allow for extra jumps to be made that were not possible before, and I can make my way around huge sections of the map without so much as touching the elevators. And when seen from this perspective, between the various new movement systems and key functionality, it starts to undermine the idea behind the map. Now I can have all the resources once scarce to me available on demand whenever I want. Now don't get me wrong, it makes the map unbelievably more enjoyable to play, and the fact Xela and Dobby have not just brought back the map, but addressed its main gameplay issues is just amazing, so a huge shout out to them. But in a sense, the map's core ideas have been somewhat obscured by this redesign, not to mention the Mustangs are back as an extra get out of jail free card. But I think most people, including me, would happily trade the original vision of the map out for these improvements, and I doubt I will ever play the Black Ops 2 version again. Also, these features are optional anyway and you could easily play without them, so you know. Anyway, thank you very much for watching the video. Please be sure to let me know any of your thoughts about Die Rise in the comments below, and what's your favourite part about the new remaster. Also be sure to give Xela and Dobby the love they deserve for this absolute masterpiece, although I'm sure most of you already have. If you are so inclined, a like or sub would be greatly appreciated, and I hope you have an awesome day.